And welcome to this holiday edition of Stuck in My Mind podcast. I am your host, WIZE, and my guest is a creative and author. I'm really excited to have him so we can have a great conversation. Welcome to the show, Rich Kirkpatrick.
Glad to be here.
Oh, pleasure's all mine.
Yeah.
Thank you for thank you for being here especially on this holiday. I greatly appreciate it. You could probably be out barbecuing or whatever, but thank you for stopping by.
It's my pleasure. We got Chinese food instead. I know because, you know, that's celebrating.
Yeah, we couldn't barbecue. It's raining over here, so
Oh, okay.
yeah. No, I made the wife some fish. I don't know, some shrimp tacos, and then the kids had nuggets and French fries.
Well, that sounds good. I'm coming over next time.
All right, so let's jump right into this. Can you share your journey and what led you to focus on creativity and leadership?
Creativity and leadership. Well, I was raised in a pretty strict religious household. People who loved me. My mom, she loved me so much. She's no longer with me, so I'm still grieving that. But so I started. She was a single mom with uh, three kids. I was still in the oven when she was on her own and on welfare, and she would walk. I don't know how far it was. My brothers would tell me to get 4 eggs and a cube of butter to to us. So grew up pretty poor, and she eventually remarried a guy and was cool dude that was our stepdad, which is kind of was a nice part of the story when I was about like 6 or 7. But there's this kind of idea that don't trust your emotions. Kind of this religious environment of don't and my mind and emotions were all over the place as a kid. Almost dream with my eyes open. I could see things. I could just it's just like just a natural born, I guess what now I would call a creative person. But back then it was like, no, you can't do that. You can't trust your feelings first. You have to put them behind whatever list of things. And I don't hate on anybody necessarily, except that my journey had been as I became a musician and got involved in jazz music, and it was about breaking rules. It was about seeing things and hearing things you weren't here. And I can remember, like, piano teacher, you got to be like Chick Corea. He says, if you don't hear it, don't play it. It's like, I got to hear it. So I got to listen to all these different recordings and stuff on cassette tapes and LPs and just absorb it. And so my journey is, up to get to high school, was in some award winning music groups. We won Downbeat Magazine's award 3 times as a high school student and once as a college student or a music school student. And so I was like, this is something I love. And I had to justify it with my background. Like, wait a minute, there's an internal conflict that was created from that. And, and even the idea of being an artist or musician was, oh, no, what are you really going to do? Richie, why don't you just go drive a bus? What are you worrying about? Why are you practicing piano so much? And, right.
Back in those days, it was more. It was yeah. Why don't you get a public service? Go become a trash guy. It wasn't. Go ahead, live your dreams. It wasn't like if you felt like I want to be an actor. No, like you need to go to school and get a trade or something and get a job. And yeah, we come from a different generation. We come from a generation where we weren't like emotions. That's something we were in. That's something we rarely talked about. That was something like you. I was raised by a single mom. It was 6 of us, um, and she walked everywhere. My mom
Oh,
walked
yeah.
everywhere. She passed away this February, so just like I'm still grieving that. But it was a different time. It was definitely a different time for me. For me it was I was lucky to be raised by a single mom because she showed me kindness, empathy, and all these different things. But for the most part, it was yeah, men don't cry, men don't share emotions, men don't share feelings. None of
So
those things.
if you want that for your job, then you got to be crazy. If you want to do, I mean, it's like, my mom she'd walk everywhere too. In fact, it's hard to keep up with her, and she's so little, and I'm like 5'11", so like even as a teenager, like I can't keep up with mom. It's just like, and that's some single moms who take care of their kids. There's a certain superpower that they just channel that is amazing. And so, yeah, the things you're mentioning, that's so true. Empathy. My mother's the most merciful person that I've ever known. She could show mercy to people. She could forgive because
Mhm.
she had to forgive every single day. She was left on her own. She was everything was taken from her, and so, but that was kind of like, so I want to be this dreamer, right? And I want to be this artist, this person who can make music and who can um, do things like that. And to do that, you have to channel all those emotions and good and the bad of, and that wasn't as appropriate. And it wasn't done out of unkindness. It was really just that was the way. I'm trying to do best for you, Richie. This is don't be, and of course, and our birth dad was a musician, so that might have something to do with it, like, "Don't be like him." And she would never say anything bad directly, but anything that was kinda, like, connected to that was hard for her.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so that kinda led me to think, "Well, I wanna understand this more because I never really did, and I wanna be able to honor the people I love at the same time and not just be reacting to it like, 'Oh, no, poor me,' because I had a lot. I was given so much."
Okay. So how did growing up in a strict environment shape your views on creativity?
Yeah, I had to discover it late in life, meaning what it meant, like things that it's normal to have dreams. It's normal to, feel things. It doesn't mean you are necessarily a bad person, even if you feel that's part of imagination. That's part of making good choices is using your mind to think, okay, what if I choose this? And you could write a whole story. This is where some fiction writers are great. You can write a whole story, and it just unpacks all the things that could go bad or wrong or in a direction that's you get to try on a character, in other words. And so
Yeah.
creativity, that really got me more interested. Oh, this is okay to do that. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily making those choices, but I could pretend I'm making those choices to see what it would be like. And that's what business people do. They test market stuff. So this is a normal thing, I found out. And so as I've discovered, I said, well, I want to learn more about this. And used to drive for Lyft and when I lived in LA, and, the precarious drive to the LAX airport, which is terrible drive. It's the worst thing. But I had got to meet people because 'cause you're stuck in traffic for, like, an hour just, moving 2 miles or something like that. And, so I tried the idea about creativity because 'cause I'm meeting people from, SpaceX people that work right near the airport there to movie makers and all sorts of folks, and it just was kept feeding this um, idea of, boy, I want to uncover more what this is because these people, they understand it and they're like saying to me, yeah, you got to do that more, Rich. You got to go kind of check that out, go learn more.
So what so what are some of the common misconceptions about creativity that you've encountered?
Well, one thing for sure is that some people we think or they think themselves that they're not creative because they might do it differently. They may not be like artsy or something, and so they figure, well, that's what creativity is. But creativity really is what people do when we thrive. When we have food and we're not living with violence, when we're able to thrive as a human being, we're going to be creative. We're going to try something new to barbecue. We're going to try, we're going to expand ourselves. We're going to grow. That's what a human condition. And so, really, creativity is all about us being that better human being who's going to make things, who's going to make a life, even, let alone a song or a book or whatever. That's cool too, but it's really more than that. I think the reason we like artists is because they show us a level of creativity that inspires us to things that we want to do in our own lives. And it might just be a new rub for a barbecue, or it might be a business plan that we've never really kind of finished putting together. So that's how I look at creativity and why it just really struck me as, okay, this is more than just, me being a musician and learning how to create music. This is about people doing what we're all wired to do. And as I read the scientists are saying, hey, our brains are wired for this. And so you might think you're not creative, but this is how all of us are. And the fact that one of the myth is that, it has to look a certain way. And that's where I have a robot and a wizard character in my book because those are the 2 sides of creativity. There's like some are more like process oriented, they're more like organized, which I'm not, so that's the robot, and the wizard's kinda like gets up in the middle of the night and they run with an idea, and scientists have shown that no matter who you are, you're gonna end up walking through a similar process called creativity, and I just think that's awesome.
And um, I've played sports my whole life and everything, and but when I started podcast, like I've never considered myself a creative person. I've never thought I was creative, or I didn't, and it was not. But it's not that I lacked imagination, because I had a, 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 a very active imagination and everything like that. But I didn't consider myself a creative person. And then I started doing my podcast, and I'm like, what is all these what are all these ideas that are coming through? And it took for me to find what I was pretty good at, to really consider myself creative, to really find out that, oh, I am a creative person. I do create stuff. I am capable of doing this. And it took me 40 something years to figure that out.
And here you are. And it's just great to discover that. I think the idea of aptitudes, the things that are in us that we haven't discovered yet. So no matter, I'm in my 50s, so I'm really old, but I'm learning new stuff. I'm thinking like, hey, this is great. Now, if I would like give myself permission at like 20 to think you can still keep learning and be bad at something, that's okay. I don't know what I could have accomplished, but I'm not done yet. And that's the whole point is the opportunity for any person listening to this is that you can discover aptitudes in you. And sometimes it's just learning something that you're never going to be the expert at, but then you might discover, like you have podcasting, wait a minute, this is something that really vibes with who I am, and I'm able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That saying, you can't teach old dog new tricks, that's completely a lie. It is completely a lie. I'm I'm more close to the 50 than anything. I'll be there in a couple of years. So for people to say that, oh, when you're old you're not creative, that's not the truth. I'm still learning and growing and developing. And by by me actually going out and starting to do the podcast, I've probably grown so much in the last 4 years since I started the podcast, because of the people I've been able to interview, and the conversations I've been able to have helped me just realize that, man, I got so much more to go. It's like I, I'm still I'm still young. I'm still learning at this age, so there's still a lot of things for me to do.
I think that's absolutely true. Now, I don't know if anyone here, if maybe you're even older than me, of the singer Tony Bennett.
Yes, I know totally what it is.
Tony Bennett, "Let My Heart in San Francisco." I live in the Bay Area, so it's like that's a cool song, one of my favorite songs. But anyway, he was, of course, a great singer, and I remember in high school we had that group I was telling you about. We got to see him with just a few other kids, and he talked to us, and he was vibrant, learning, and he was only like in his 50s or whatever back then, which was a long time ago. And but then he learned how to paint. I think what age 60, I think it was, and became this
Wow.
incredible painter. And people said, "Well, who's done that? That's a really cool painting." Well, he just said, "I want to learn something new," and I don't know if he was on a tour bus and just took his easel and his paintbrushes with him or what, but here's a singer who obviously was an expert at singing, and he's now was a painter at the end of his life as well.
And the amazing thing about him as well is he worked with a lot of younger artists.
Oh
Even,
yeah, there you
even
go.
later on in his career, he worked with Lady Gaga, worked with so many other younger, and he introduced himself to a whole new generation by doing this, by working and connecting with these younger artists. He got to introduce himself to that generation. Even though I've known, of course, I've known about Tony Bennett almost all my life, but is he just knew how to evolve.
Yeah, and that's the thing is when we create something, one of the things I learned is at least the scientists kind of you're not the same afterwards because you grow into a different version of yourself, a more evolved version of yourself. And so someone, he didn't have to do that in his age. He could just spend his money and been boring. But he says, no, imagine how much fun he had
Yeah.
being able to hang with like Lady Gaga, for instance.
Mhm. Yeah, imagine. So how can someone who believes they are not creative unlock their creative potential?
Well, one, you got to have what I guess simple way of saying is an open mind.
Hmm.
So there's two basically. I mentioned the robot and wizard. So most people are naturally robots in our society. That's 80% of us. And so we're just trained like, we got to find that one answer. And the wizard, few of us, 20%, we kind of fall on that. Um, so how you'd learn that is it's discovering that you do have that wizard in you. So if you're the robot and you think, okay, I may not feel like I'm an artistic person or a creative person, it may be just being, how do I then get my mind open like the artist does, like the wizard does? And one thing you can do is to explore curiosity as a practice. And I remember as a kid, before Game Boys, on the family road trips, our stepdad would take us in this big old station wagon with a tin on the roof. And you're going like miles and miles, driving up California. It takes forever. What we would do is we'd look, okay, how many out of state license plates can we see? By that time, there were 5 boys of us kind of sitting in the car. And so we had to do things to not fight. So that was one thing we did. But that curiosity, as soon as you start seeing one or two of those out of state plates, you start seeing them all the time. You could see them faster.
Yeah.
So that's one way to train your brain. It's kind of like, a stretching exercise or whatever to get you to start using your brain like the wizard does, which is just open to more things coming in. But it's not mindless. It's not saying I'm giving up all that. And that's the other thing people think is I just got to be like this whole completely different person. You have to trust that inside of you is that creativity. So to unlock it is just basically saying, okay, I'm going to practice that curiosity. And then you can end it and say, okay, that game's done. You know all the license plate. What else do we do now? And so that's kind of how creativity, that's why I call it bridging the science and magic in my book.
Yeah.
Because you're going between these all the time. And the genius knows how to go back and forth. Because these artsy people, they are people who think they're creative and they always tell you ideas of things they want to do. And everyone rolls their eyes because it never happens. So that's the other side of it. There's people who they dress like they're creative, or there's a saying that just because you're misunderstood doesn't mean you're an artist. so like that guy, or gal, they're like always like, oh, look, this would be great if we did this, but they never do anything. So that's where the person over here who can make things happen, they have to trust that that's part of your creativity, and to value the fact that you're organized or you're wired that way, instead of saying just these people who are quote misunderstood or whatever artist people are, and they have to learn from you how to like actually put a game plan together. And that's kind of where, depending on which one you are, that you have to grow in different areas. So you may be not thinking you're creative because you have ideas, but you don't get them done. And so you need to learn from people who can help you, time management, for instance, and strategy and things like that. On the other side, you need to learn to have things where you're freer to play, to try things out, like try podcasting or whatever it is. And in that process, you're learning what those aptitudes are. And so that's really, I think, how one strategy is, just to figure out which of those two you are. And then if you're the one who's the typical person, who says, you just don't feel like an artist, you are creative. You just have to learn to think like the artist. Curiosity. The other person needs to learn to think about, okay, how do I work with constraints now, with deadlines, with timelines? And that person can unlock their creativity by doing that.
So I think you kind of sort of answered this next question. What role does curiosity play in the creative process?
Well, if you're not bored, you don't get curious. So it plays a huge point in it. But meaning your curiosity has to be driven. So the role it plays is really kind of, it's one of the central things, because you have to learn to be curious of things that you're not noticing. That's what it is I need to learn to train my mind to look at things that I'm normally just going to walk by. And so it plays a central role. So it's kind of looking at it this way. Instead of thinking you got to create something out of nothing, curiosity says, what is in front of me that can I use to make something with? Like the pantry. I'm stuck. There's a storm outside. This is all I got. What can I do to make this edible? I mean, and so curiosity is like, I'm looking for something in the pantry I normally would not even think about cooking, but it's not past its expiration date and it's edible. So how can I make this work? That's where curiosity really is a central point, I think, in creativity.
All right. Okay. So can you explain the science behind how we are all wired to be creative?
Well, the science is, as far as the idea between just being a left or right brain person, as they say,
Yeah.
to the fact that we have brain networks. And what that means is our entire brain, or all of our body, in fact, is used to create with. So what the scientists now are saying is that these you have multiple brain networks. Some of them, you might be familiar with what they call the default mode network, and that's kind of the default mode is where we want mindfulness is to take us out of that. It's the place where we get kind of negative and think, why is it this way? And we go in these thought loops and things like that. And so a lot of what that uh, meditation is to get you to lift out of that. Well, creativity happens in that space. So the scientist said that default mode is your natural way of saying, I could do better than that. Or why is it done this way? And that's what you're doing that. Well, the other brain network, and see, and that one I just mentioned, that's the wizard. Now, the robot is what they call a central executive network. And so that's the map of your brain, the part that takes all the ideas in front of you and sorts them and prioritizes them and judges things. And so you can see where the science in this is that both of these brain networks are involved in creativity, is what they found, because they put these contacts on people's brain and they had them do everything from play jazz saxophone to recite poetry to all these things. And they tried to see this is the parts of the brain. These are the parts of the brain that are involved in those activities and the creative activities. And so the default mode network is a place where some of us will stay. You'll stay a wizard, and that's where that person won't come up with a plan, but they have all this ideas of things they want to do. So you have a list of ideas, and the other side, where the robot is, that's the central executive network. That's where you start to want to judge things. But if you don't have ideas to judge, then you're gonna like just execute something bad. You're just because you got to get things done. So the bridging between them is what they call lateral thinking. So you have this ability now to switch. So here's the switch, Will. It's like basically it's saying, do I need to focus right now? Meaning, do I need to like judge in front of me because I need to move forward? Or do I need to defocus right now and to get more ideas? And so
Mm,
the science has said to us, like, that's what creativity does. And so you're like sanding, like, this way is defocusing because I need to get more ideas. Like, I'm writing a song, and I need more ideas for this bridge. So I want to like have 5 ideas before I even decide. And the producer helps me with it. Okay, then I take it to the producer, and now we're sitting with the speakers in the studio, and we're saying, no, this one, not this one, not this one. Oh, this one will work, and here's why. And you can see what they've done is they've said, okay, those kind of activities are all part of creativity, but you have to learn when to do each of those because you can't do them at the same time. And
mm.
that's where the magic happens is understanding, is this the moment I need to focus or the moment I need to defocus?
Okay. So how does creativity intersect with leadership in your experience?
Well, that's it. It's really cool how these researchers that I was reading, Bowman and Deal wrote this book, and it's kind of like a multiverse, which I like because I like Marvel. It's cool to think of things being in a multiverse. But they say leadership is like being a person who's in charge of looking at 4 universes, and the universes would be like this HR universe, which they call family. It's and then there's another window you look through, and that's the structure, like the factory, how it all gets done. And there's this other one, politics is like a jungle, and then there's this like a stadium. It's like your team banners, like what are we all about? So you take these 4 frames of these 4 different universes, and the creativity is important because in order to be a good leader, you have to be able to switch between each of these to be a good leader. I have to learn how to care for people in one window. At the same time, I got to jump to another window and make sure that everything's operating and the bills are paid on time. And then I got to keep my job because there's people vying for it and are against me, even though I thought they were my friend. That's the jungle part of it. So you got to deal with that. And then you got to jump over to the other one to think, okay, I got to remind everybody why we're doing this in this company or this activity. This is why we're doing it. So a leader who's really good isn't going to rest on just one they're good at. Like if they're really political and can keep their job, that's great for them, but it's not great for the people. So that's kind of the cool thing about the idea of creativity is the switching of mindsets. So the more agile you get, the more you're able to see the complicated things going on, and
Mm.
that's kind of cool. I like that about the idea of leadership, not just excuse me, it's not just being something a charismatic person has, because you have to be really contemplative and really think deeply about these four universes before you make a decision. And that takes a lot of creativity. It takes humility to say, maybe I don't see this frame very well, so let me call so and so in, and we'll talk about that so they can help me see it better. And that's kind of where it takes the creative mind to be a good leader.
Okay. So how do you handle failure or setbacks in the creative process?
Personally, I don't handle them very well. um, and I think that's a great question, because they will happen. You're gonna. It's just things sometimes just don't work. Um, and I think the idea is the fact that if you think of the term creative process, just keeping the creative process going is what success is about. So part of that is understanding, just like getting up the next day, you got another day to live, you got another day to create,
Hmm.
you have another opportunity. So if we only look at creativity like, let's say, the tombstone of that person, here's what they did, that's done. No, the creativity stopped. The creativity is what that person's doing every day they're alive, which is a good lesson for me to think, hey, I'm alive. I get to make a mistake. I get to have a setback, because this is part of the process of living. If you interchange living with creativity, you understand that really creativity is just part of
That's part of
living.
it. Yeah, absolutely. Um, what advice would you give to leaders who want to foster a creative environment in their teams?
That's a really good question, because you will be a star if you can get other people that. And there's this term that I've learned over the last year called psychological safety. And it's just being in your work environment or your team, whatever your team is that you're leading, you have to create what they call psychological safety. So that means people can say things that you disagree with as a leader. People can point out, like, this idea, maybe, how about this one, without repercussions. They can also complain without repercussions and not misbehave. We're not talking about misbehavior here. We're just talking about that. And so I think that's how you have to have that in your team. You have to have that kind of trust where they can say, okay, and in the right setting too. You don't want to, make it overly messy, but at the same time, are people free to say, no, I, I've been working on this for X amount of months, and look what I found. Can I put an opposing viewpoint in there? Um, so that's important. There's this also thing I call embracing the awkward. So it's basically saying that, if I'm not willing to listen to ideas as the leader that are opposite, I'm not going to learn. Even if I never choose that idea, the best thing that's going to happen is not just that they get listened to, but I get to learn something. And that's going to make me better. So that's really what creates a team that's creative, because they see that, and that gives them empowerment, and they'll hope that maybe they're thinking you're dumb because you didn't take their idea, which is, they should think that, I think, right? You don't want people who don't have that confidence. At the same time, they think, but I'm glad to work for this person, because I know I can give my best. And even that didn't fly for this project, maybe the next one, I how can I help them see that my idea is that great? Maybe I got to get better ideas.
All right. So how do you personally stay motivated and inspired in your creative endeavors?
How do I stay motivated? That's a really good question, because motivation really has to come from inside. It really has to be something that is there. And in my book, one researcher there's like 10 different motivators for creativity. And like towards the bottom is like money, but I need to eat, of course, right? So that is a real one. It's like, if I don't get this project done. So that does keep me motivated. But in the long term, what keeps me motivated is, do I believe in this? Do I believe in what I'm doing? And part of one of my central beliefs is that I want to pass on what's good to other people. However many laps I have around this planet, if I can help another person succeed, then that's worth it. So my motivation doesn't always come from me succeeding in benchmarks. It comes from me understanding that I still get to be that person who helps motivate, encourage, kick someone in the rear end, whatever, in their life. And that's really a great place to be. And so that keeps me motivated to think, well, okay, I got to keep going to do that. But I have to have it from inside. It's not someone telling me, you know, no, God bless the CrossFit people. But I can never get yelled at like that all the time. It's like, and some people they need that. But for me, it has to come from inside. And I think the researchers say that too, is that that's how you're going to get it. You have to find that voice in you that's saying, this is what I love to do.
Can you discuss the importance of challenging the status quo in creative thinking?
Yeah, I've gotten in trouble for that, by the way, in the past. um, and I think it's extremely important. That's why that psychological safety is important as a leader. And maybe you're not in a safe environment. Someone listening here, and you're thinking, but it is important. I think one of the books I was mentioning, they mentioned the space shuttle. Some of us were watching live TV when we were young and saw the space shuttle blow
The
up.
challenger, yeah, the
Oh
challenger.
my goodness, they're like a teacher on there. It's like
I was in fourth grade when that happened. Yeah,
it's like let's just traumatize the whole country. Um, but there were meetings that happened where people really did who knew what could happen, who never said anything, and so that's a cautionary tale that there is a reason why you are dissatisfied about something. There's a reason why those feelings, back to the story of feeling like those emotions don't have any place. They do. You just have to deconstruct them and do it at the proper time and earn your right at the seat at the table to do whatever it is. But yes, you have to learn to challenge the status quo because, you know, boredom, is a good indicator. So if we're bored because it's the same, and so just lean into the boredom and say, yeah, how can it be better? As opposed to running from it and just saying, okay, we'll deal with it later. So yeah, challenge the status quo because otherwise it'll change anyway.
okay. So, what are some key habits or routines that support your creative process?
Well, I like to get outside and I walk my dog every day. And that was a good thing for me because I was really in a point of just being kind of low. And my wife came in with a puppy and the little puppy is like stuck his head out of the thing. And so that gave me, since he's like over a year now, but it's been a really good habit for me because I noticed how when I'm taking care of that puppy, because I don't have little kids anymore, they're all grown. Um, that's important. And taking a walk to center my thoughts, to buffer, before I have a meeting with somebody or even myself. And I think that's important. So that's one habit. Moving, got into running a little bit, which is, you know, bittersweet with that. But just the idea of getting outside and walking and just being there, that to me is a big deal. So that's a practice. The other practice is if I can sit down with people and have those those conversations that you don't normally get to have. It costs a lot because you have to just have that moment. The art of the hang, there's an art to it. Whether it's get a decent cigar, one I can't afford, but I'm going to have it anyway, and sit down with some people and just be able to reflect, help to, as a group with what life's about. So that's another practice. I'm not living this alone. I'm not doing this alone.
Okay.
And so no, and my family relationships, that's the third thing that keeps me going, to understand, my wife and my family, that's how important it is that they are a part of it. It's just not about me all the time, which is great. Because if it is, it gets pretty gold. Um, and so those are things important as a creative person to see that if I'm living a healthier life and emotionally, I'm trying to do that, and relationally, my work is going to be better, and that's how I work better, is by living better.
Okay. So how do you balance structure and spontaneity in your work?
That's really great because back to what we were talking about with the focus to defocus, or the
Yeah.
robot to the wizard. This is perfect. It's a difficult thing, and that's really where wisdom comes in, is understanding when is it time to stop being spontaneous and to go for it. Now, having been a student of jazz, I don't really do a lot of jazz music now, but when I was a student, enjoying it, you're learning that whole process of structure and spontaneity. You have to have structure. You have to have 12 notes. You got to know those notes You got to know the rhythms. You got to play you got to have time. So part of it is understanding that in your reservoir, as I call it, you have to prepare yourself with the skills needed in order to be spontaneous and make the spontaneous work. So the balance is asking the question: am I prepared enough to be spontaneous, or is it just going to come out gibberish? And so that's really important. It's fun to be spontaneous, but it's even more fun in that spontaneity create some kind of structure even in it, and it just surprises people. That's what creativity does. So the balance really comes it just from a musical sense, and I think this would apply to anything people create. Is okay. I got to brush up on my scales if I'm going to play that kind of scale, that kind of a song. I'm going to have to get my timing good if I'm going to play with that player, and really just enjoy the moment. And that's that under the ground part of structure that a lot of people um, who think they can sing. They haven't done the woodshedding, we used to call it in music school. You got a woodshed before you go out there. And, in athletics, you can't just like cram becoming good at whatever it is you're doing, whatever position you're playing. You have to like break it down to these pieces.
Hmm.
And creativity is very much like anything we do in human, whether it's sports or music or whatever. It's you master the little pieces of it. And
Yeah.
then you take those pieces, and then that becomes your spontaneity. That becomes your, okay, we've learned all these different plays. Now we can put together something for this game. And really that's kind of how that works, the dance of it. So you don't prepare, you can't be spontaneous. But if you don't have no place to be spontaneous, it's not fun to prepare. It's kind of like doing laps and never being able to play a game.
Yeah.
I was talking with a parent about wanting their kid to learn piano, and they didn't want to do this real strict classical thing because you're playing scales for 5 years. See, that's like running laps and never getting to shoot the ball. Um, and that's kind of really the dance between it is we have to kind of find that balance that works.
Okay. Can you talk about the role of collaboration and creativity?
Collaboration is really makes it's what makes creativity really fun. I think we kind of have this myth of the superstar, the diva, or whatever, the maestro, in our society. These names, and some of those people really are like super gifted. Like you mentioned Lady Gaga. I mean, she's like way beyond human, perhaps, but she knows how to collaborate.
Hmm.
Like in Tony Bennett,
Yeah.
his role in collaboration with Lady Gaga you're mentioning, and how beautiful that was. They were both learning something. You think, why does someone 87 need to learn anything, right? But that's where collaboration is powerful. So it has a purpose in the fact that you can do things faster. Number one, so if you need to like get a project done quick, being able to have your teams broken in the idea people and perhaps the execution people. So the robots and wizards is another term for that I put. That's where you can really get things done on a faster timeline. From writing a song, co-writing a song with four other people, I had know my strengths, and my daughter were co-writers together. So we're like, she's really good with melody, so I save that space for her, and so we collaborate. We can write a song in hours, where me it'll take like days, personally, to do something close to the same quality. So the role it plays is maximizing people where my best is even better with a team that I get to create with. And that's really if you do collaboration correctly, that's what happens is you end up with a project that goes beyond what any of those individuals could ever do. And the hope is that you come at the other side and say, that exceeded expectations. Um, but I think that's the role it plays. And it plays a role too in the fact that when you pass something on, like I was mentioning earlier, I think that really gets the inside motivation to it.
Even with my podcast, I started off with me. It was me talking about what was going on, because at that time it was the George Floyd situation, the 2020 elections, and it was me just talking more out of frustration about everything that was going on. And I enjoyed podcasting. I just didn't enjoy the content. And so when I switched it over more to having interviews and conversation, and that's when I truly fell in love with it. because now I'm collaborating with other people. We're putting out content that's positive because we're focusing more on helping people, not not focus on all the negative aspects that's going on out there. So when I truly started just interviewing people and having these conversations, that's what I truly really fell in love with podcasting. It was like, oh man, this is what I love. I'm having such a great time interviewing these people because at the same time, I'm learning so much about people and life and everything. And I'm having these wonderful conversations and I'm growing and I'm having an impact because some of these stories people are relating to, they're sending me messages and they're like, I needed to hear this episode with you and such, or I needed to have this episode, or even an episode where the person that I did the episode with, when I released the episode, they had been going through some stuff, and that episode brought them back to that how they were when we recorded that show. Because when we recorded that show, she was so vibrant and all this. And she's like, man, you don't understand. Since we've recorded this episode, she's like, I've been going through so much and I didn't even feel like that person. But then when you put in the descriptions and all this stuff and you put the one of my favorite pictures as the thumbnail and all this, she was like, man, it reminded me of who I am. And so when I'm able to have that type of impact, I was like, oh, I love this. This is what I want to continue to do because there's people need to hear this.
They do. They need, and this is kind of where like that doing something alone, like being a lone wolf, is kind of the danger we have. That's why we need to talk about stuff. And our society's gone through some really, really interesting things, and the fact that we feel frustrated is a great to go back to the point of don't lose that frustration. You can create from it. You can
Yeah,
start a podcast like you did. You can make something, and that to me, this is why I create, is because it's better to add something to the world than just tear something else down. Now there are
definitely.
things that need to be teared down. We can talk about that, but imagine you made something.
Yeah, definitely. What impact has blogging had on your understanding and practice of creativity?
Yeah, I was blogging way back in 2005. So that's so funny how that's a long time ago. Um, and it really, at first, there were all these other church musicians, and they didn't know each other. And there's a few of us who were nerdy, like I'm a nerd. So I had a website, and we would like find meetups all over the country, and it was like this incredible building of community, like I'm sure you have with podcasting. And
Yeah,
that there wasn't really podcasting back then, but it really was a great way to do what you're saying. I was just, first of all, I was just talking about things. And then, what made it worth more was the conversation, was people writing you notes back, people disagreeing with you, all sorts of things like that. And that really, and I learned a lot from that. Learned how to communicate, learned what my own voice was. I think people, it's any kind of journaling you can do. We don't all have to do it publicly, but it's a good practice.
yeah, it is. Um, it's helped me grow the podcast in the last couple of years because this past year is when I added the blog to the podcast. So I also have a blog section of the podcast, and it's made a difference. You can
Mm,
see the growth in the podcast. A- and so for me, it's all these different things that I'm incorporating now into the podcast, into what I'm doing creatively, and it's having a positive impact on what I'm doing.
that's great. And again, you're just taking you're creating something with what you have, all the life experiences and all the conversations you're having here, and that's how we that's how we live, I think.
So, how do you see the relationship between creativity and personal growth?
I think it's the same thing. I create, therefore I
Yeah,
am.
yeah,
So when you make, so you're blogging and podcasting, me for writing my book and my blog or whatever else I'm doing, those things, are helping me grow too. You mentioned it. You're creating a podcast that's teaching you so much and helping you to grow and to see, hear other voices and see other faces. And this is why I do it too. I used to interview folks. One of my favorite poets. Shout out to Micah Bornay from Long Beach. He's a wonderful poet, and his whole philosophy is fight evil with poetry. I'm like, this is great. So I had to hear a story. I've known him for a few years, but it's just like that whole thing about personal growth is like, you know, sometimes you can put it in a poem, but sometimes you can put it in creating, a barbecue with friends that you've been delaying having, and that could help you grow. Like, I've been delaying doing this. Why don't I do that? Why don't I create? I know some of us are good at barbecue. I'm not, but my brothers are all great barbecue guys. And it's like, but that's part of why creativity is about personal growth. Because when you do create something, it is going to have a wake, and it's going to have a wake bigger than you think. Picasso said, "I never intended to have meaning in anything, but people brought their own meaning to my creations." He didn't mean for it, but people say, "Oh, this must mean that. This must mean this." And so, even if we're not thinking about it, we are what some people call meaning making factories. And so that's why it grows. So meaning, giving our lives meaning is part of growing our lives. And so if I'm making something, I'm helping bring my life and others that I don't even know what it is sometimes meaning in their life. And that's what growth's about. It's about seeing beyond just the raw material to what the story is, and seeing how that story is my life being a part of this world, community, how I am a character in it that can really have a positive impact. And
Yeah.
and it blows my mind sometimes when I do that. And I think if we could see that, you could see how important your life is. It's so important that when you make something, by you making it, the world changes.
So, what are some of the challenges people face when trying to integrate creativity into their daily lives?
Well, of course, some people work two jobs that I know. It's tough today.
Yeah.
Today, it really is. It's not, or you have kids you're taking care of, or parents you're taking care of. So that's a great question, because like, how do I fit creativity in? Well, if you look at it, creativity not as the art stuff necessarily, but as you making a life, how you're handling that life of yours is a creative opportunity. So the way you can start is thinking, okay, I have this box, the sandbox I call it, I'm living within. How can within this, which I only have this many hours, how can I make my life in this? Not just make a project, not just add something to my list, but here's my list of what my life is. How can I give that meaning better? How can I focus that better so I know I'm moving towards some vision that I'm having with it? Whether when I get this age, I have this as part of my life. I have a better relationship with my children because I'm going to be doing this. I'm not adding things necessarily, as I am seeing that it's part of life. And in that way, we all got enough to do, but do we have enough to be? Can you be who you're supposed to be? And that's what's important. You are worth being a person out
Yeah.
there. And that's what a lot of people, and myself included, we forget that. It's not, so we just keep on the grind. But we are worth being as a person with all that's in there. And to be able to kind of think about what that is, to give us some space to do that, the creative efforts we put in, some people garden, they barbecue, whatever it is you do, that helps you to put meaning into all those things. And so if you look at it that way, it might actually give you some breathing room, because you're able to take a breath about, this is my life.
Can you recommend any books or resources for those looking to deepen their understanding of creativity?
Besides my own book.
Oh, you're gonna plug that one in a few minutes.
Books. I do know one author, Austin Kleon. He's really great because his books are really small, and one of his books called "Still Like an Artist," and it's a really great way to begin to think about creativity. And it's kind of cool, like steel. I'm from East San Jose, so I know what stealing is. Not that I ever did that, but um, It's a really cool little book. You can just read it in one or two settings, and it kind of can jumpstart that. Another one, like Stephen Pressfield, War of Art. He basically has these little essays in there. It's all about like what's coming. I'm fighting a battle to create, which we were just talking about. The person, how do I fit this in my life? And he basically talks through fighting that voice, really in these little bites, so you can like read bits of it. So that's why I like those two books, because that's how my brain is. I can't like get at long things like that. But
Yeah.
those are two I definitely recommend: War of Art and How to Steal Like an Artist.
Okay. Now, like I said, now it's part of the show where you get the solo screen and you get to plug away, let everybody know where they can find your book.
And
Where
my
to you.
book My book is called Mind Blown: Unlock Your Creative Genius by Bridging Science and Magic, and you can get it on Amazon in Kindle or print form, but it's also available Spotify, Audible, any kind of your public library um, will have the audio version as well. I like audiobooks. So, or you can go to my site, rkblog.com, and find me and whatever else I got going there.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Thank you for being such a wonderful guest. This has been a great time. Time flies when you're having some great conversations. So I appreciate you being a guest. Appreciate you taking your time and stopping by and having a wonderful conversation.
My pleasure, man. Anytime.
All right. Don't leave just yet. Let me close out the show. We're chat a little bit off the air. But once again, I appreciate you stopping by, man. This was great. I had a wonderful time.
Me too.
All right, everyone. This shout out to everybody who stopped by the chat. Mickey Delaney, what's going on, brother? How you doing? He goes, hi, Rich and Wise. How are you doing? I am well. And as you can see, Rich is doing well. So I hope everyone out there is having a safe holiday season. Um, Shout out to my Real Wise fam, Poppy J, Brandy J. Love you guys. Shout out to the boss lady. Love you and appreciate you, baby. And as always, a big shout out to all the essential workers out there. God bless you. Be safe. You know how your boy Wise does it. Peace out.